Gregory, welcome. All right, we're good to go. We're streaming, whatever we need.
Yes, you're good to go.
Okay, so thank you all for being with us this afternoon. And I'd like to call this ad hoc budget advisory committee to order and ask you to just start out and join me in a moment of silent prayer. Thank you. Amen. So this is where we start the fun. Every budget cycle of reviewing our departmental requests. It looks like today we got three up for consideration: planning, preservation, fire department, and TNT. So we'll get right started. Amy, you want to do any intro or go right to Robert Summerfield?
We can go right into Robert. I'll stop sharing. I know he has a presentation to show everyone. So Robert, you should be good to go.
Okay. Robert, you want to take us away and share with us what y'all are thinking for next year's budget for planning and preservation?
Yes, sir. And can you all see the presentation cover slide there?
Yes, sir. That's right.
Awesome.
Here.
All right. So good afternoon, Mayor, members of the ad hoc committee. So just real quick, just like in the last few years, I want to quickly go over, what our mission is at the Planning, Preservation, and Sustainability Department, and then go over some requests that we have as a part of this budget cycle. The good news is our requests are less than they have been in previous years, so that part is good. But there are some substantial projects that we wish to work on in the coming year. We continue to try to work to right size our staffing needs so that we can address the community, specifically the development community's need for timely reviews of their materials that they submit to us. And then, just like I'm assuming you'll hear from all departments, we do have some operational needs, just as everybody's needs have gone up in order to operate their daily lives. Our department's operational needs have gone up as well. So real quick, just a reminder what we do. As a department, our mission is to improve the built environment and the quality of life for all people in the city of Charleston. We do this through a number of core functions, but those core functions all revolve around the focus areas of making our city waterproof to the degree that's possible, being inclusive in all of the work that we do, and taking a balanced approach in how we do the work that we do in the community. This is our organizational chart for the department. We do have 6 divisions with a section, which is the Minority and Women-Owned Business Enterprise Office that are managed out of the Planning Department. And we have a tremendous team, and I want to thank the council. Last year, you did approve a couple additional positions in the department. We've now brought on board the Affordable Housing Development Coordinator. She's hit the ground running. We did steal her from the permit center. So she already knows the way the city systems work. And so she's going to be able to help us help affordable housing projects navigate that system, move through it as quickly as humanly possible. And she is, like I said, she's already hit the ground running, and we're really excited about that. We also believe that we'll have our mobility planner. That position is taking a little longer to recruit from last year's approvals, just because the market is such that there's still a lot of communities hiring, particularly in that mobility planner space. But the team has been diligently working on that recruitment, and I think we'll actually have someone that we'll be able to announce that we're hiring within, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. So that is our org chart. As always, I like to remind council and anyone viewing this, we are an evolving historic city. We are not stagnant. We have not decided to, sit back on our successes. We continue to work to improve, but we also continue to prioritize the historic nature of our city, and not just on the peninsula. So this is an important component, and it's going to come up later in projects that we're requesting. We are a historic city holistically. We have more areas of our city that are historic and important to our community for that historic value than just areas of the peninsula. It's really important that we're recognizing that with some of the project work that we are looking to do in the coming year. Once again, I've broken our budget requests. I believe our BFRC team has provided you all the line items, but really I put everything into 3 buckets. The spending related to people, and then specific projects, and then general operations requests. So in our people, we are requesting an increase of about $221,000 for, and I have one too many numbers up there, so sorry about that. But we are looking at an increase of that amount. We are in need of 2 additional positions, I believe, that will bring us to a place where we will be really at the optimal level of staffing that we need based on current workloads and projected workloads. One of those primary positions, and we've requested this position in a couple different forms over the last several years, but the demand for an urban design professional additional work in our Civic Design Center just continues. We have tremendous amount of work already kind of backlogged in that division, but we have some major projects coming up in the next year that are really going to necessitate us having an additional urban designer, preferably at the senior level, to assist the work that the city is doing. And I want to specify, this is not a department ask. This is really a city ask. As we are moving forward with the Haygood study, a number of other studies, including hopefully PED, having a design professional help to, in some cases, maybe project manage, but also just serve in an advisory capacity in those efforts is a tremendous asset for the city. We also are asking in this year for an additional staff architect. At present, we have 1 staff architect for the entire city. The gentleman who's currently in that position often works 45, 50, 55 plus hours in any given week to try to keep as caught up as possible with the workload. This is the staff architect is the position that serves as that architectural resource for actually reviewing projects as they're going through the permitting process, in addition to being a resource to our design review board, our board of architectural review large and small. So they're the ones out there doing field inspections on work that's ongoing, particularly on our board of architectural review large projects. And we just need an additional resource there to keep up with the demand and the workload. I mean, try to be a little more proactive in some of our inspections and review. And sadly, we've had a couple incidences where we've not caught something until it was kind of really late in the process, and it's caused unfortunate delays, and in some cases unfortunate costs, because somebody had to go back and correct something that if we had had additional resources, maybe we would have caught that earlier on and it would not have created some consternation. The third major request under people is stipends for development board volunteers. One of the things that I know you all heard during the work that the special committee or the special commission did, and what HARC has continued to work on, is access for all people to be able to participate. And I know council members, you've had this discussion in the past about just what's the salary needed to even be a council member, because you have to you have to have some resources to be a council member. Well, you also have to have some resources to be even on our BZA or our Board of Architectural Review or DRB, because those are all volunteer positions, and there's a cost both in time and in resources to attend those meetings. I mean, so one of the things that we're requesting in this budget year is to help address that and to increase the pool of people who might be able to be available to serve, is to provide a really modest stipend per meeting for those development boards, so that folks who maybe need to pay for a babysitter or pay for transportation to be able to attend those meetings no longer have that burden. We find a lot of communities this is becoming a best practice for addressing the kind of the divide on representation on boards. And Mayor, I see Councilman Shade has his hand up. I'm open to any questions while I'm going through this.
I'm glad that you've got that in there. But I also think that we need to be adding this for all boards and commissions, from the History Commission to the Commission on Women, to every one of these commissions. We don't provide, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I don't think we provide even, in some instances, refreshments for some of these folks. Maybe water, but a snack or a coffee. And also, if they have to park somewhere, depending on what time they show up, if the meters are running, literally, they have to park in a garage, they are out of pocket for that as well. So I'm glad you're putting this in here. I think that this is sort of something we've overlooked for time. And they need to be at least not have to worry about any out-of-pocket expense on coming to these meetings and participating in these meetings. And aren't some of these volunteers conflicted out of doing business with the city as well, Robert?
So we try to make sure that we have alternates. So if somebody does, for instance, their architectural firm is presenting a project and so they can't sit, we have an alternate architect or someone else. We are, as big as folks seem to really like to think that Charleston is getting, and it is growing. We are still a relatively small community. And so, yes. We often have, particularly in some of these boards where there's specific professionals that are kind of required for those boards, we do have incidences where we have folks that are conflicted out because they have an item on that, or they may have a business relationship with someone who is presenting. So that does happen from time to time. We do have alternates specifically for that reason. So in an effort to kind of address that. I would say, Councilman, you're absolutely correct. In a lot of other communities that, again, are moving to some kind of stipend to help break down those barriers to participation in boards, it is more universal than just the development boards. Often, though, it does start with the development boards and then moves its way into some of the other advisory boards and commissions that a community may have. And then, like always, we are asking for some additional overtime. We, again, are very thankful council provided some funding, and BFRC recommended funding for professional development and training. I think that's a huge component of our retention strategy. We are very appreciative of what was put in the budget from last year. We do think we need just a little more in a couple of our areas. We continue to want to make sure that our public review boards are receiving the training and acknowledgement that they deserve. And then, of course, we want to continue to be able to provide opportunities for interns. We have a tremendous pool of folks between Clemson and the Citadel and College of Charleston that are local, as well as others who just see Charleston and see what we're doing and want to come here to learn. And so we want to make sure that we continue to provide those internship opportunities as well. So that's the people part of our budget request. And this is how that would look if we did get those 2 additional positions. We would add that staff architect within our preservation and urban design division. And then we look at that senior urban designer to add to our civic design center. I will point out, we have, as I mentioned, we do have a backlog of projects in the civic design center. and we have constant requests for additional consultations, additional projects. Honestly, the Sumar project was one of those examples where, you know, unfortunately, when council asked for some additional drawings on that, you know, we looked at our availability, and we are projected out project wise to not really have openings for new work in that division for another 3 to 6 months at minimum. And so again, just vital that as we embark on some new projects coming up in the year as a city, that we have that additional resource to help with those projects. So speaking of projects, so again, just as has been the case for the last 3 years that I presented to this committee on the planning department's budget, projects make up the lion's share of our budget requests. Most of these requests are related to one-time expenditures for projects. In this request, which is down, we are actually not asking for nearly as much in this year for projects as we have in previous years. But we do need, and this was acknowledged when we agreed to the consultant doing the zoning ordinance rewrite, that there was a little delta between where that final contract came in at and where we had previously been budgeted for. So we're making that request for an additional like $25,000, I think, on that project. Additionally, as we started to work with the funding that was provided from last year on updating the historic architectural inventory and survey for the peninsula, we went out, we got some informal quotes, and we realized we were just woefully underfunded for the amount of properties that need to either have a survey or update their survey. And so we're requesting some additional funding in that project so that we can really get a decent quantity and get the biggest bang for our buck there in terms of getting that inventory updated. Further, there's been a lot of requests for work in West Ashley. As I mentioned at the onset of this presentation, you know, the peninsula is where we customarily and a lot of our tourism looks at the history of the peninsula, but there are a lot of neighborhoods in West Ashley who have been coming to us repeatedly to take a look at their neighborhood and their community and work with them, not dictate to them, but work with them on possible historic designations, maybe some demolition review so that they're not losing historic homes from their neighborhood. And so before we go doing all of that, we believe that it's appropriate to really get a survey of what is out there. And so we are requesting money for West Ashley for the cultural asset survey and an architectural historic update for West Ashley. Further, and I know this has been mentioned previously, we wish to do a kind of a rethink Folly Road, but a rethink Sam Rittenberg plan. But it's not just a plan. A lot of work has already been done. There was work done during Plan West Ashley. There's been other efforts that have been done that address some of the higher level planning ideas for Sam Rittenberg. So as a part of the funding request here, it's not just to do a new plan, it's actually to review existing planning work, update where appropriate, and then actually begin doing the engineering for updating Sam Rittenberg so that the actual infrastructure work that would be called for in a rethink Sam Ritt plan can actually get underway, and we can then use that initial work to go after implementation funding to get that infrastructure done. Few other smaller projects. As many of you likely saw, there is an effort to designate a Little Jerusalem district or commemoration of a Little Jerusalem district on King Street. And so we would be looking for some funding to assist with that. We want to provide, we've been working very closely with Councilman Saccharin and others. I'm sorry, Councilman Shade?
I don't want you to forget about the Lebanese contribution on part of this Little Jerusalem district on King Street either.
Okay. we'll keep all of that definitely as a part of that study and that review to as we're looking forward to commemorating the contributions of different communities actually on King Street.
I think you got, yeah, I mean, it certainly is a very distinct community and a very distinct district. It really was multicultural as well. So
Right.
I'm glad that we have above the market we installed. I forgot how many years ago it was, but there were and have been other ethnic groups that contributed to that particular area. So it's very rich. It really is a very rich cultural aspect of that. And I see Councilman Rappel was nodding with me because his family was involved in that. And the I kid people that there was a gathering place called Pete's Diner. And some of the old timers will remember that, but that is where all the merchants would come for a coffee break. And you got a full education about the multicultural aspect of King Street. If you sat down for a cup of coffee or so on any given day at Pete, run by a Greek fella named Gus, by the way, which I thought was also quite interesting.
Well, Councilman Shade, that you're exactly right about this being a part of King Street and part of the city that is multi-ethnic, multicultural, and it's my understanding that there's been some discussions about changing that name to be more inclusive, and due to the fact that I haven't met a Jewish person that's ever heard of this area called Little Jerusalem, that might be sort of what some other people in the city called it. For some reasons. So that effort and that discussion is underway to be a little bit more inclusive and accurate. So just thought I'd mention that.
Understood. And we'll make a note of that, Councilman. I was not aware of that. So that's a good note. So we'll make sure that we but again, we do want to commemorate the contributions of a number of different cultural groups that have made King Street over its evolution what it is. So that's a part of that effort. As I said, we've been working with Councilman Saccharine quite a bit on concerns in the neighborhoods north of Line Street on exactly what BAR purview in that area means. And so through some work with some community members and what have you, we determined that one of our best bets, not like all of our eggs in one basket kind of thing, but one of our best options for assisting with understanding there is to provide some better layman's level guidelines on what a renovation project north of Line Street should look like and what to do. And so we want to spend a little bit of money to create those guidelines and do them right. Again, we continue to work on our settlement community documentation and outreach. And then finally, there's been a lot of conversation around how do we do King Street and holiday lights and do the blinky lights across the street and what have you. We've been looking at a lot of different examples of how it's done in other historic districts, commercial districts. And what we've found is that we need to actually study what infrastructure exists and what infrastructure would be needed to implement a holiday light program that has minimal impact on existing historic facades and other community assets like our light poles and what have you. So right now we don't know what we have that's actually usable for this. And so that's what this study would be about. And again, a relatively nominal amount of again, that would lead to a potential capital project down the road to implement the results of that study.
Hey, Robert.
Yes, sir.
This is Dudley. Couple of questions for you. Can we do the same kind of holiday light study for Hampton Park, for instance? And I know in the past, Hampton Park has had lights in it during the holiday years and years ago. And I'd just like to see whether or not we can sort of bring some of that holiday spirit to this part of the peninsula. And I think that Hampton Park is a great example of being able to do that. So we can look into that. And
Okay.
then the other question I had was with regard to the projects for the design center, and how you may in fact have a backlog, and that is a part of the reason why perhaps Sumar could not be a part of that. How do we prioritize those projects? Or how do we select which projects go to the Civic Design Center?
Yeah, so we routinely reshuffle the projects that the design center is working on. Primarily, it's based on deadlines and timing. So is there funding availability for a project? Is something under a deadline that's owed to somebody else? The design center works very closely with Robbie and the TNT team, Jason and the Parks team. So a lot of times what will drive moving things around will be, is there funding that's about to go away? Is there funding? Are we preparing for a grant application? Are we working with Sarah and the grants team to get a grant application that we need some visualizations of things? Right now, we're working with the Housing Authority as they're putting out their RFPs for the RAD program on a number of their sites. We've been working very closely with them. Oftentimes, again, projects with Gianna's team over in Housing and Community Development, as they're working on or identifying a site that they may be looking to move on for a purchase. Civic Design Center, we will push into their program and maybe push out something else for a little while longer so that they can quickly get some visualizations on what a density or massing study might look like for that site to help Gianna and her team as they make the decisions on the viability of whether that site, is a good option for affordable housing and what have you.
Thanks for that answer.
It's almost always about funding and deadlines for, and usually outside deadlines, not self-imposed deadlines.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Rappel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Robert, I just wanted to touch base on the zoning ordinance rewrite, just to see generally how that's coming along and whether or not we're looking to remain in budget and how that's all shaping up.
Yeah, so again, this request is not due to a budget overage. This request is to fill in the delta between what the contract came back at, which was $23,000. And so, but previous allocations were only for $1 million. So we kind of moved that $23,000 worth of work into a additional services bucket that I'm now requesting funding to cover. But the project itself is moving forward on budget. It is moving forward. We are currently working through review of some of their initial code analysis, where they're trying to, we've internally had a little chuckle just because we know how difficult it is to understand how our process works. And so they've been trying to break down the zoning code to understand, as the consultant team, how our process works. And we're kind of reviewing the roadmap that they've kind of put together to make sure that it's actually the roadmap for how stuff actually works versus maybe how it's written in the zoning code. But we are moving forward. We have had our first citizens advisory panel and technical review committee meetings. I think we have some more scheduled in the coming months with those two groups. So, but yeah, moving forward.
Yeah, that is certainly something that I've experienced all over the state in different jurisdictions I've worked in, is that you've got sort of what's on the books, and then you've got sort of how what's on the books is interpreted and sort of the culture of how the bureaucracy works. And since we just got finished talking about Little Jerusalem, we've got the written law and then we've got the oral law, right? And you've got to have an understanding of both to understand what's going on.
Right.
And so it's very important for that process to take place. So state the obvious, unbelievable opportunity and important generational project for Charleston, and really just an opportunity to address so much of what we talk about around here, whether it's affordable housing, resiliency, and all the above. So very, very, great job with this, and let's keep pushing forward.
Yeah, and speaking of the resiliency, they're paying very close attention to the water plan. There's a lot of we're working very closely with Dale, so we understand what's coming out of the water plan. So we have that informing the direction and decision-making options that will go into the zoning code as well. All right, so that's our projects. And then finally, just to end on, and this is a relatively small part of the ask, but we do have some operations requests. The ERC, the Entrepreneurial Resource Center, will be coming online in 2024. We're this close to having that turned over to us from the contractors there at the James E. Lewis apartments. And so, do I have the right? I believe that's the right. Anyway, so we're very close to having that turned over, which means we have to fully fund operations in FY24. And then we just have some continuing operational needs as the cost of materials, software, memberships, supplies, and things have gone up as well. And so with that, that is my presentation on the planning department's budget request for 2024. And if there are any other questions, happy to take those. Otherwise, happy to turn this over to Amy.
All right, any other questions for Robert? Hey, Robert, on your project list, and this may just be somewhere else, or I know we were having some contributions, hopefully from some other partners, but what about the Haygood Avenue rethink effort?
So I believe Amy has been talking to me and to Dale and to Robbie, and we decided that it's in somebody's budget. I'm not sure whose budget asked the collective, because that is a multidisciplinary, multi-departmental project. And I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure whose budget that ended up being. I know we'll play an integral management role in it, but the funding, I think, is being requested through somebody else's budget.
No problem. I just, it seemed along the same lines as some of those, but I get it. It could well be somewhere else. Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. So next we have the fire department. And Chief, if you want to go ahead and share your presentation, unless you want me to do it.
No, I've got it. Thank you. So, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for having us in to talk about the fire department's budget request for fiscal 2024. As we go through this, if you have any questions whatsoever, just let me know. If not, I can answer them at the end of the presentation if you like. So just starting off with the fire department's priorities, and going back to 2018, that's when I came into the Charleston Fire Department. And the big conversation that I had with Mayor Tecklenburg, and the charge in front of me, and therefore the charge in front of the team, it was to improve morale throughout the department. It was to control call volume on the peninsula without having the first request being more personnel. And it was to address infrastructure issues.
Hey,
And
Chief,
that if
I'm
we-
sorry. Your presentation isn't up.
It's not.
No. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, then why don't
You want me to do it?
Yeah, sure. Unless, did it come up now?
I can see it.
Can you see it now? Okay.
Yes.
We're good.
There we go.
You know, me with technology, it's, I might do well as the chief of the fire department, but me as a IT person, maybe I need to put that in as a budget request. Anyway, now that everybody can see it, I will tell you that in conversation with Mayor Tecklenburg in 2018, which is my start in the Charleston Fire Department, the issues in front of us were morale, and to improve the morale, to do something to control the call volume on the peninsula without having the first request be more people. And it was to do something with infrastructure. I think we've spoken at length about the infrastructure needs in the Charleston Fire Department. So then going forward from 2018 to now, the question is, within the fire department, what do we see as the big issues that we've got to tackle? And these are in no particular order. They're just the way I typed them out. But infrastructure is a huge issue for the department. And that's both the facilities that we've got, the facilities that we need, and the personnel that go along with those facilities. Now, when we get into the budget requests, another thing to keep in mind is as the department grows with firefighters, there has to be an associated growth with support personnel. So that's across all divisions in the fire department. We can't just focus on firefighters in the firehouses. We've also got to grow the fire marshal division. We've got to grow the training division. It's a big operation, and we've got to make sure that everything moves along together. So infrastructure, community risk reduction, that's been an ask every year since I have been in the fire department. And really what we want to do is we want to make sure we have a sustained presence in the community, not just with the firefighters that are riding the fire trucks. We want to make sure that we are in the communities every single day, that we are addressing the most vulnerable populations that we find, which are, for the purposes of fires and medical emergencies, those are the young and the elderly. So we want to make sure that on a daily basis, we can get into daycares, that we can have a sustained presence in the school system, that we can get into elderly care facilities, that we can make sure we're targeting church populations with the intent of increasing their fire safety knowledge, but also their medical knowledge. The more the city of Charleston grows, the harder it becomes for us to strictly think about fire protection in terms of when the fire happens. We have absolutely got to get ahead of the curve and make sure that we're educating the public so that they can take care of themselves. And then we eventually, over a generation, we become the secondary measure. The operations of the fire department become secondary. So that's a big issue for us. Our internal professional development is big. I've said before, but I'll say again, that in the last 5 years, over 2/3 of our executive command staff have been promoted into their positions. So there's a lot of team building to be done, a lot of new positions to grow into, and we can't leave that to chance. We've got to be very intentional with that. And then obviously, we talked about it on Monday. It was spoken about at the council meeting last night, and I'll say it again today. Our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts we have a fire department that's not very diverse. And I know it, and you know it. I don't want it that way. I want it to reflect our community. I believe that you and I are on the same page with that. So we have to constantly focus on that, and we need help going forward, which we have an RFP out now. We'll have a consultant come in to give us some expert help to go forward. And then we will make sure that we take very, very deliberate steps going forward to diversify the fire department. So along with all of this, in the last year, we've spent a significant amount of time revamping our strategic plan in the department, and we've come out with new mission and vision statements. I said them on Monday in the Public Safety Committee, but I'll say them again. Our mission is excellent people providing exceptional service. So every budget request that you see is either specifically addressed to the mission or the vision. Obviously, we want to bring excellent people into the organization. Once we bring them in, we want to grow them into the firefighters and the chiefs and the officers that we need for them to be. We want to make sure that we don't leave behind our non-sworn staff. We want to make sure that whatever position you fill in the fire department, we bring you in as a good person and we grow you so that you can provide exceptional service. If we do that, then we accomplish the vision, which is to create a safer Charleston. And I often say, if we're to talk about that one sentence for just a second, the Charleston that we have today should be just a little safer than the Charleston we had yesterday. And the Charleston we have tomorrow should be just a little bit safer than the Charleston we have today. For
Hey,
us,
Chief.
yes.
Chief, this is Dudley. And I haven't figured out how to show my hand raised, so sorry for the interruption.
No, please, that's great.
It's fine.
On the D&I in
Yes, sir.
particular, just looking at the visuals that are being used, and I don't think you necessarily have a choice, but just looking at the visuals themselves, it does not appear welcoming to women or to people of color.
Yes, sir.
And
Okay.
that's the visuals. And as an old civil rights person, visuals are very important, particularly if we're attempting to recruit.
Yes, sir.
For instance, as an example, if there's a housing complex and it's being advertised and all the models are white, that in and of itself send a signal subconsciously to people as to whether or not they're welcome. That's just a general observation. I don't even know how or if it can be fixed, but just looking at the visuals and the pictures that's interspersed within the presentation also sends a very subliminal message. Just an observation.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you pointing that out to me. I gave an interview to, I think it was Channel 5 last week, and one of the things I said was, eventually, I want a child on the side of the road, when they see a fire truck go by, I want them to see somebody that they identify with so that they can connect with the fire department on a better level, but also, quite frankly, so that they think that's a career that I could have. And I'm not even following my own advice. So I appreciate you pointing that out. You're muted, sir. You're muted, council member. Council member, you're muted.
Dudley, you muted. Councilmember Gregory, you muted.
Yeah, I said, even if it's just some pictures of interaction of our fire department with different groups,
Yes, sir.
would send a very different message as well.
I'll make sure I take that into account. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So going forward, Councilmember Shade,
Steve
do you
Correa.
have a question?
Yeah, I have a quick. What is it that you think that the police department is more successful with diversity in makeup versus the fire department? What do you think is the difference between those two departments that's created that?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I think that I can't really speak to the police department. I do think that in the fire department, we have worked so hard to revamp the way we've done things. And for example, our physical agility test in the past really focused a lot on upper body strength. And I believe it's proven that typically males have more upper body strength than females. So we would have a lot of really good female candidates that would fail out at the physical agility point. And for whatever reason, the department either didn't recognize that or they just didn't do anything to address that issue. Now, I'm not sure how the agility test in the police department is, but there's that focus. And then I also think, again, not being able to speak for the police department, the fire department, from what I understand, prior to 2018, and actually in 2018, 2019, 2020, we were so understaffed with actual firefighters that we could put on the fire trucks, that when we were hiring personnel, a lot of them were coming from out of state. And what ends up happening is people from, say, the Northeast who can't get on in their hometown fire department will come to the Charleston Fire Department and get incredibly good training. And then they'll stay with us for a year or two. But most of those candidates are white males. And they stay with us for a year or two until their number comes up back in their hometown, and then they leave us. So we were in a chronic state of being understaffed, and the applicant pool that we were getting was typically white male. So we have totally revamped the way we hire personnel. Instead of it taking months now, it takes 4 days. We bring people in on a Saturday and we offer them a job on a Tuesday. We intentionally focus on local talent, thinking that if you're within 25 or 50 miles of your family, you're probably going to stay here. And we're working with the school system to make sure that we can diversify the applicant pool. So I know that doesn't really address what the police department is doing, but I just wanted to let you know, I think where we fell short in the fire department.
Well, I think that's a wonderful observation, by the way, because early on, after I was elected, I went to and visited a training session, a recruit training session, and I asked the recruits, how many of you are from South Carolina? I think one hand, and then that one person, are you from Charleston? 0. And then I went around and surveyed, and you were absolutely correct. They were from Ohio, Illinois, different parts of the country. And then we had that problem with them returning back to their hometowns 3-5 years later.
Yeah.
Well-trained and well-experienced at our expense. And it was costing us a lot of money in doing that. So I think maybe that's maybe just as simple as what you just said. We give priority to the locals in our recruiting, and that we focus on that. But I just wanted to comment on Councilmember Gregory's statement to you earlier. I think that's critically important to keep that in mind with the visuals as well. So, and I know you're open to all these ideas and open to all these suggestions. You do listen, and I appreciate that. And it's just such an important aspect of the city's fire department that we are diverse. And I know you're working on it, and I just want to give you encouraging words that
I appreciate
some of the things
that.
we need to tweak. Thank you.
I think we're actually in a really good spot. I know you said it last night at the council meeting, but our vacancy rate currently is 0.7%. We're at 3 vacancies in the fire department, 419 positions authorized, 416 of them filled, and the 3 vacancies are civilian staff. So we have spent so much time just trying to staff the fire apparatus that we didn't really have enough bandwidth to focus on everything else that we needed to do or that we should be doing. If it wasn't critically important for the response to the emergency, we really didn't have the bandwidth. And now we are staffed up, and we are able to transition from 2 fire academies per year, and each fire academy takes 6 months. We're able to transition from 2 fire academies a year to 1 fire academy a year. We are able to concentrate more on the training of our firefighters to make sure that their skill sets are intact. But it also frees us up to do that critically important work of getting into the community and making sure that we diversify the fire department. That is the biggest issue that we face, that we have to tackle, that is not strictly fire response. So we finally have the bandwidth to do that.
A quick question for you. Do you think that the salary increase had something to do with it?
Most definitely. Yes, sir.
So we need to keep that up.
Yes, sir. I believe
Thank you.
The increase in fiscal 2023 made a huge difference. I'm going off memory here, but I believe I think we had 14% resignation rate last year. And right now we're at about a 4% resignation rate. I typically want to be at 5% or less for an organization our size. To retain as many people as we have retained in the last year wouldn't be possible without that salary increase. Now, I know that our firefighters are still talking about how much it costs to live in the city of Charleston. So that's, if we're talking about pay and benefits, I think that's the critical conversation we've got to have. And it's, what does it cost to live here versus what kind of salary is offered? That's not just a firefighter. That's not just a police officer. That's citywide. But I do think, to answer your question, I do think the increases that you appropriated in the current year went very, very far to retain people. So moving into our budget requests, I will say, if you're looking at them right now, you see a lot of FTE requests. And if you're starting to total them up, I'll go ahead and tell you it's 36 total in the entire budget request. And I'll go through those, but the very first thing is not a request for personnel. It's a request to place our fire marshal division into the fire pay plan. Simply stated, every sworn person in the fire department, with the exception of our fire marshals, are in the fire pay plan. And the fire marshals are not. And the example I typically give, if the police department, I know they've got a pay plan too. If every sworn member of the police department, except the detectives, were in the pay plan, I think people would think that that was a little bit odd and something that needs to be corrected. Our fire marshals are in the same position. Our fire marshals are sworn firefighters. They have the same certifications from the state of South Carolina that I have, or that the other sworn firefighters have. So I'd like to get them moved into the fire pay plan in the upcoming year. We go back a year, and I made a presentation to the Public Safety Committee. I believe it was in September of last year, and it really revolved around the pay issues. But I brought this up then, and the direction from the Public Safety Committee was to have the fire marshals placed into the pay plan. But there was quick agreement between K-Cross and myself that we didn't have time to do it. We didn't have time to do it properly. So I would like to go ahead and move forward with that in the upcoming fiscal year. The second request is for 15 firefighters to staff engine 123. It's the firefighters that will go in the firehouse that will be constructed on Johns Island. We're going to break ground on that in the first quarter of next year. It'll have an 18-month construction phase. The reason we're asking for the firefighters now is that we would hire them in July of 2024. We would have them trained up at the end of 2024. That firehouse would be getting ready to come online, but it would also coincide with the St. John's Fire Department relocating some firefighters out of that area and closer to Key Largo. So we would be able to maintain fire protection in that part of Johns Island. As we have tried to increase our efforts for diversity, equity, and inclusion, one of the things we did a couple of years ago was took 2 vacant firefighter positions. We combined them to create the diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator that we have in place. So at that point, when we combined those, we had plenty of vacancies. But now, again, we've filled up every sworn vacancy that we've got. So we're asking for those 2 firefighter positions to be put back in the operations division of the fire department. You see a data integration and analysis manager. The Charleston Fire Department, along with all of our auto aid fire departments, all operate under the same records management system, which is required of us. And the records management system is going to be transitioned in August of next year. Along with that transition to a new records management system, we all pay into a data analyst position, if you will, or an RMS administrator position with the county. And the county has signaled their intent to get out of that management. So in August of 2024, we will have a new records management system come online. At the same time, the county is prepping to not manage it for us. So this request would put a records management manager in the fire department to make sure that we can continue with that component. We have a request for a social media coordinator. One thing that has struck me as I drive through the city is the incredible growth that we've got in every area of the city. The growth is astounding. And I know that if you take Cane Hoy as an example, with how fast Cane Hoy is growing, I could put people in the Cane Hoy community every single day. And unless I really target the young and the old, which I've already talked about, I'm going to have a hard time connecting with everybody and delivering a safety message. So I'd like to have a social media coordinator to make sure that we are giving a very consistent, a very timely, and a very thoughtful safety approach. That could very likely bridge the gap between the young and the old. We've got everybody else in the middle, and if we're giving one social media message, say we have a spike in fires in West Ashley and they are kitchen fires, it'd be very easy to put out social media that addresses safe cooking practices, stop, drop, and roll practices, that type of thing. The next request is to increase the staff instructors that we have in the training division. They have been working for 5 years, nonstop, trying to train firefighters and put firefighters on fire trucks. I think it was said last night at the council meeting, but we were down 74 positions when I came into the department in 2018. That got as high as 79. So when you start to factor in trying to make up 79 vacancies, and then factor in the people that we were just losing in the course of a year, that training staff has worked incredibly hard to get us to where we are today. The detriment is that the rest of the fire department has not been able to maintain their basic firefighting skills. Now, please don't take out of this conversation that we're in any danger of not having the right firefighter skills, but we do need more personnel in the training division to make sure that we can concurrently tackle recruit training and incumbent training so that we keep training up firefighters for the expansion of the city, but then we focus on the skill sets that our incumbent firefighters have so that we can make sure that they are exactly where they need to be. For request number 7, it's going to closely mirror a request you'll see in a minute, but request number 7 is for 3 positions that would go in the fire marshal's division to create a community risk reduction team. That's that whole team that we would use to focus on the very young and the very old and make sure that we are in the community 7 days a week, delivering safety messages. Again, the vision of the fire department is to create a safer Charleston. This would enable us to do that. We have another request for the fire marshal's division for an assistant fire marshal that would focus on accommodations inspections. I know there's been plenty of talk about accommodations and short-term rentals. We were able to get 2 positions last year in the budget. Our request last year was for 3 positions. So this request would be to add that 1 additional position so we could maintain our inspection schedule on short-term rentals, hotels, motels, inspections in the accommodations district. There's a request for a quartermaster. This person would be placed in the logistics division of the fire department. We have 3 people that work in logistics in the Charleston Fire Department, but we also have over 20 facilities in the fire department. So you can imagine the logistical lift to make sure that 20 facilities have everything they need from a new lawnmower, if a lawnmower breaks, to paper towels, to dish soap, to firefighting gear. It's a huge endeavor. And we have found that we don't have enough personnel to make sure that we get things out in a timely manner. Councilmember Shealy, do you have your hand raised?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to ask, you have that full-time position. That must be a pretty skilled position if it's 122,247. Is that correct? Is that the correct number then?
That would be salary and benefits.
Okay.
I don't have the salary versus benefit numbers in front of me, but I can get those for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Excuse me. The next request is Battalion Chief in the Special Operations Division of the Fire Department. Currently, there are 12 special operations units in the fire department. And the big ones that I'm sure you're already aware of are the Marine component, the hazardous materials component, the urban search and rescue in case there's any type of collapse. Currently, we have one assistant chief who manages the 12 different teams. And what we have found is that there are a tremendous number of meetings that go along with these special operations components, meetings with the Coast Guard, meetings with DHEC, meetings with the state on different things. And one person simply can't go to the meetings, but they also can't do the scheduling for the special teams, and they can't do any visioning for the future for the special teams. So we'd like to get a position and put a battalion chief who's specially trained in special operations in that role to lessen the workload on the assistant chief. The next request is 3 more positions in the fire marshal division. This is the one that I said was going to closely mirror one that I talked about just a minute ago. This is to establish a community risk reduction program in the city. Our original request was for 3 last year and 3 this year. We weren't able to move forward with that request last year. That's why you see 2 different requests of 3 in the current year. Again, 6 people to cover a landmass the size of Charleston. It's going to be a big ask for them, but we need to do something to have a more sustained presence in the community. The next request is for a medical training coordinator. As good a fire department as we are, as good as we do firefighting, it's undeniable that medical calls are about half of our call volume. So we would like to have a medical coordinator to help us build out that medical program, make sure that the continuing education that we need for the medical certifications is occurring, make sure that we can interface with the medical director, make sure that we are staying up to date on different technologies that are coming out to increase the care that we can give to the community. The next is a basic. Now we're pretty much out of the personnel requests. There's going to be another one, but the next request is a baseline item increase of $22,000 so that we can do things like the Charleston 9 Memorial. We can do awards banquets. We can make sure that we are doing those things that either the community expects of us or that is typical in the fire department, or in the case of the Charleston 9 Memorial, it's just the right thing to do. We don't currently have money budgeted for those types of events. So what we end up doing is looking across the budget and finding the money to put those things together. So we'd like to get an increase so we can make sure that that's taken care of. We'd like to pay the training staff a little bit more. Now, if a firefighter is working in the operations division and chooses to go into the training division, that firefighter gets a 10% premium because they're coming off shift work and going to daytime work. But we still find it hard to keep training staff in the training division. So we'd like to increase that by 5% as a premium to go into the training division. The last FTE request it would be for division chiefs in the fire department. I've requested this 4 out of the 5 budget cycles in which I've been in the Charleston Fire Department. This would place 1 chief per day in the operations division to coordinate the entire activity of the shift that's working. Currently, we have 12 battalion chiefs that work in the operations division, and they all report to 1 assistant chief. And I think we could all agree that that span of control is not what we want it to be. And the solution isn't to put another assistant chief in place because we would lose operational continuity. The solution really is to put one chief officer working per day to coordinate all the activities of the on-duty shift. Currently, we give extra assignments to one of the battalion chiefs working, but that requires that chief to come out of his or her designated geographic area. And it causes us to shift fire protection around quite frequently for that one chief to attend meetings and to do the scheduling. The next request is just additional funding for upfit on vehicles that we purchase and bring into the fire department. You can imagine with the light package and the siren package and the mobile data computers and all the other things that go into those vehicles, especially with costs rising as they are, we do need a little bit of extra money to make sure that the upfit can be completed without us having to scour the budget and try to find extra funding. The next request, I talked a couple minutes ago about special operations. We have one assistant chief who handles 12 special operations teams. With the exception of small budget for hazardous materials and a small budget for marine, we actually don't have a budget for the special operations function in the fire department. You can imagine if I just take the marine component, if there is any maintenance to be done on one of our marine vessels, that's a costly endeavor. So again, what we do is we scour the budget and then we find the money somewhere else and we go ahead and we keep the special operations division running. If there's new extrication equipment that needs to be bought and it hasn't been budgeted for in the current year, we scour the budget, we find the funding, and we make the purchase. So we'd like to go ahead and establish a budget for the special operations division so that those things can be taken care of through the planning process. We would like extra funding in the fire marshal division for community risk reduction supplies. Again, I want to keep hammering on the fact that we have got to engage the population where they are. And to do that, we need extra funding for things. It doesn't even have to be coloring books and crayons for kids. What I'm really talking about is money for smoke detectors and carbon monoxide alarms, batteries to replace in smoke detectors, that type of thing. We've already spoken about diversity, equity, and inclusion issues in the fire department. I can't pretend that those don't exist, nor would I. And it's a huge issue for us. So we've got the diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant who will come on board and help us with a proper roadmap for the path forward in the Charleston Fire Department. I don't know what that consultant is going to say, but I would like to have some funding earmarked so that when that consultant comes back and says, hey, Dan, you need to do these things differently. You need to train your people differently. You need to put different hiring practices in place. You need to make sure that you approach diversity, equity, and inclusion differently than you're doing it now. I would like to go ahead and have a line item established so that I've got the funding to go forward. We all know that that is a critical component that the fire department is falling short on. I want to make sure that when the consultant gives us a path, we can act on that path immediately. The next request is in the previous year, we have purchased a new physical agility test for the fire department. Again, it's one of those things that focuses less on upper body strength and more on total strength and total fitness. It should help get a more diverse applicant pool past the agility test portion and onto the rest of the hiring process. When we bought the equipment, one of the things that was recommended to us by the vendor was that we go ahead and get this validated so that if anybody challenges the testing that we're giving, we'll be able to defend that legally. We'd like to go ahead and get the funding to validate that. The next request is simply additional funding for training, specifically non-uniform training, sending our civilian staff to human resources training, sending people to training so that we can better mine the data that we generate in the fire department, that type of thing. I had told you I had talked about all the FTEs, but I evidently told you wrong. Then the next is an assistant fire marshal in the fire marshal's division. And this is for something called the compliance engine. We rolled that out citywide about a year ago. And what that does is it's a third-party vendor that sprinkler contractors and fire equipment companies need to report to this third-party company when sprinkler systems have been serviced, when restaurant hood systems have been serviced, that type of thing. And it helps us manage the workload. But what it has done is when we made the requirement that all the fire equipment vendors had to report to this third party, what we found is that there were so many more businesses that were reporting in than we had anticipated, that the workload has been tremendous. So this assistant fire marshal position would be solely to manage the compliance engine. Now, the compliance engine is uncovering a number of fire protection issues that we did not know existed. But with the money in permitting that would be generated with the extra work, we feel as though this could probably be revenue neutral or very close to revenue neutral. The next request is for firefighting foam, and we have, it's a requirement that we keep firefighting foam on every apparatus so that if we get a flammable liquids fire, there's a very specific way to try to put those fires out, and it's through the use of firefighting foam. Current firefighting foams have been found to contain PFAS chemicals. Those are those forever chemicals that you hear a lot about now. So we had to take the PFAS foam and we have to get rid of it. So we've got 1,000 gallons of foam that we've got to replace. So the replacement cost with non-PFAS foam is the request that you see in front of you. As part of our medical program, we have to maintain a contractual relationship with a physician to manage the medical program. We currently have a contractual relationship with Dr. David French. Very, very good relationship. But what we would like is some additional funding to establish a secondary relationship in case Dr. French is out of town for any reason, or if we have any medical questions, we'd be able to go to another provider and get answers. Councilmember Gregory, yes, sir.
Yeah, a couple of questions. The item that deals with replacement of smoke detectors and the like.
Yes, sir.
In terms of priority, why wouldn't that be a higher priority than, what is it, 20?
It is 18, sir.
18, it's 18, okay.
Yes, sir.
How do you establish the priorities then? I guess is my question.
Sure. So what we do in the fire department, we typically get about 110 requests from the department in the course of the budget process. I know that Amy would really be mad at me if I sent in 110 requests. So we typically settle on 30 or 35 things that we feel like we absolutely have to request to make sure that the fire department's going to function the way we want it to. Typically, the personnel requests are going to go a little higher. And the reason that you see the request you're asking about at number 18 is because we currently scour the budget and we find funding and we purchase those items. We provide them to the community free of charge, but then we also pursue grant opportunities. And we've been pretty successful in getting grant funding to purchase things like smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. I just don't think that a prudent course of action is to always rely on grant funding to make sure that this life-saving equipment is given to the community.
The second question, your 24 budget request is below the 23 budget request. Am I correct?
In terms of sheer dollars,
Yes.
I am not sure, to be honest with you, council member. I can check on that.
Well, yeah, maybe I misread one of the charts then. And so I'll retract the question, because my follow-up question was going to be, if we were to fund all of the priorities for 2024, then what would be the difference between 24 and 23?
I can find that out for you, and can send that over to you if you like.
Okay,
I don't have the answer.
okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
We're looking that up, Councilmember Gregory. Have it for you in a second.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for those questions. Moving on, these are not requests that are coming through the fire department budget, but obviously there are different things that need to occur in the fire department, and the information gets funneled into other departments for their requests. I just wanted to make sure that we touched on station renovations very quickly. Station 15 is on Cumming Street, and we have requested $200,000 for a renovation of that facility. That wouldn't be a total renovation, but it would just be to address the immediate problems that we see. And, you know, I've said to a few of you, I believe, that on the peninsula, we've got firehouse, we've got a firehouse at a meeting in Wentworth, a firehouse on Cumming Street, firehouse on Hugie, a firehouse on
Shannon.
King Street Extension, and one on Cannon Street. The one on Cannon has just been renovated, and the one where fire headquarters is fairly new. But all the other facilities are in desperate need of renovation. Our problem is we can only shut one firehouse at a time down on the peninsula, and then geographically we have to really try to figure out how to keep fire protection in any given area. You know, obviously I can't take fire protection and move it away from the community that's below Broad Street. I just can't do that. The fire problem is too great down there. So when you see this request for Station 15, it really is just to address some issues to get it to the point where we can get it totally renovated. Station 6 on Cannon Street, it was just totally renovated. We do still have some issues, so we've requested funding through Parks. Station 14 is in Carolina Bay, and we have some building envelope issues that we've had since the facility opened. We've requested Parks to address those for us. Station 20, some money for repairs to the building that we lease. And I said in the Public Safety Committee meeting the other day, we're moving forward with the land acquisition for a replacement Station 20. Station 10 is in the Avondale section, and we're seeking money to do a total renovation for that facility later in 24. Station 18 is on Daniel Island, and that facility needs to be renovated. And then Station 12 in West Ashley needs the driveway resurfaced. So we've funneled all those into the Parks Department. With Councilmember Gregory, I see that you have your hand raised. Is that still, do you have additional questions?
No, I'll lower it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'd lower it for you, but I don't, me and technology. Speaking of technology, over with IT, we have asked for a couple of things. The highlights are there's that new records management system that the area fire departments are going to go to later in the year. That would cost $95,000, and it would be attached to that FTE request for the data analyst. That is budget priority number 4 for the fire department. We've asked for another drone. I think anybody who has responded to a fire in the recent past, and I know Councilmember Shealy, you responded to an apartment fire that we had in West Ashley a couple of months ago. You can see the work that the drone does for us in aiding us with situational awareness. Where is the fire currently? Where is the fire going? What can we do safely with our firefighters? So we've asked for a replacement drone. And then we would like to put interactive sign and messaging boards in all our facilities. We'd like to display the response time in each district so that our firefighters know how quickly they are getting to emergencies. We'd like to be able to project out weather information when storms are coming in. We'd like to be able to project out what is going on in the Charleston Fire Department so everybody's aware. And then in lease purchase, we have requested one fire engine apparatus, one ladder, one air unit. That's the unit that goes to all major incidents and fills the air cylinder that we carry on our backs. A replacement brush truck, and then we have requested for 4 smaller vehicles. I realize I've talked for a long time, but that's the presentation. Can I answer any additional questions? Councilmember Sheila?
Any other
Yes, sir.
questions?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And I will agree with you. I got to see it firsthand. It was incredible the way you could fly that in, see where the hot spots were, see what needed to be taken care of. And it made a big difference in that one. I did want to ask you, though, I didn't see station 16 listed on there. I don't know whether it needed to be or not. I just know there's some issues with station 16.
Yes, sir. So station 16 was renovated, got a really small renovation in the last year. And the intent was to make sure that we could continue to use that facility for 5 to 7 years while we are in the process of obtaining land for a replacement facility. And I do know that that's moving forward.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Waring, good afternoon.
Yeah, hey, how are you?
Good.
Listen, go back to the DEI issue where you had a position in the previous budget and now you want to, I think, reclaim those 2 positions.
Yes, sir.
What's the strategy going forward in the new fiscal year to hopefully approach and begin to come up with solutions with your DEI problems over there?
So good question. So we do have the DE&I coordinator in place, and that's Captain Kevin Weeks. I think you may have.
Right.
And then so we have the RFP out to have a consultant come in and work with us and give us a roadmap on specific things we need to do to move forward to diversify not only the applicant pool, which would then diversify the recruits that we bring in, but over time, we need to diversify the rank structure in Charleston Fire Department. And the consultant would be tasked with working with us to accomplish that. We have a second position in the Fire Marshal's division that assists the DE&I coordinator with efforts. That's firefighter Kim Drayton. And if we can move forward with either of the requests for 3 positions in the Fire Marshal's division for community risk reduction, an additional task of that group would be to push forward in the community with the DE&I efforts while we're working in the background based on the consultant's feedback to change the culture of the fire department in general.
Do you know if North Charleston reflects the similar issue with racial imbalance?
I know that they do not reflect the community, but I also know they reflect the community much better than we do.
Do we know what they're doing? Have we asked or interceded? What are they doing to try and fill some of those positions?
Well, one of the things, and I was talking about it earlier, one of the things I know that they have done is they've focused on local talent, and their hiring process is days. Instead of months. So one of the things that does, and we're starting to see it in the Charleston Fire Department. We went and met with North Charleston, and one of the things they suggested to us was that we switch our hiring process to days versus months. Now, somebody in Ohio who can't get on with the fire department there, it's probably a white male. The fire departments traditionally have been a white male
Right.
organization. they could come down and they could go through our testing process. They could devote a day to one component, then they can go back to Ohio, then they can come back to the next component. And they come into the Charleston Fire Department, they stay for a couple of years, and they go, not everybody, but it happens enough that it's concerning. So now if we have the hiring process at 4 days, we bring them in on Saturday, we offer them a job on Tuesday, they've got to stay a couple of extra days to make sure that they can get their physical and we can do the background on them. But it requires somebody from out of town to devote maybe 6 days in the city. And that's a pretty big commitment, both with time and with money. But what North Charleston has done, which we are now doing, is the current design enables us to get into communities and generate an applicant pool that is local talent. And they don't have to have the financial commitment of the 6 days in a hotel room.
Right.
So our applicant pool is becoming more locally driven, which will generate a more diverse applicant pool. We're confident that we've seen it in the current class that we have at the training facility now.
You know, one thing that we may be able to do is get with Helen Hill, you know, with the CVB.
Hmm.
And obviously she has a very good relationship with the hoteliers in the area, you know, not only the city of Charleston, but, you know, the region. And she may be able to help mitigate some of that through in-kind contributions, mitigate some of that hotel stay from the potential applicant coming in. You know, we're trying to recruit. But I think maybe we can call on some allies to kind of help out
Yeah,
with
we'll make
that.
a note of that.
And then on another subject, so we're committing money in the budget to this that you're talking about, not the hotel part, but I mean the additional stepped up, I guess, my vernacular recruitment efforts, DEI efforts. Were you asking for additional money in the budget?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir. I do have a request.
That's all I need. That's all I need. To know. You know, I don't take up any more time. But on the Hughes Street Fire Station, Mr. Mayor, that's a question for Mr. Mayor and the chief. Are we looking for another split? Is there a potential piece of property in a close proximity to maybe build a new fire station instead of renovate the Hughes Street Fire Station? Are we even looking for something that may be in close proximity?
To the meeting street,
Not meeting up, I'm sorry, Hughes Street, I'm sorry, Hughes
just
Street.
Hughes Street.
Right,
Our intent so far has been to renovate the property, to be honest with you, just like we've been able to get FEMA grant dollars for the other renovations we've done.
okay.
We haven't actively been looking for another property, no.
I just wondered, I don't even, and I know this property is in some kind of trust, you know, the instant homes, you know, kind of like, well, on the corner of Hugie and King. Just wanted to, can we potentially talk to them about, the answer might be a quick no, long Charleston, yes, but anyway, can we potentially maybe buy a piece of property from them and carve out a station there? And
Well, you know, we're using a substantial part of their property for
yeah,
our
for the pump station, for the
pump
drainage,
station and water retention there.
right?
Yeah, Mayor, it is part of if we ever get to Laurel Island, a fire station is part of that development agreement, Councilman, as well.
Uh-huh.
We actually spoke with the planning department at some point in the past. It's probably been before the pandemic. And once we laid out the response complexities on the peninsula, you know, their initial question to us was, would we prefer a new firehouse versus renovating Station 8 on Hughes Street? And once we laid out the response plans and geographically where we need firehouses, it actually painted a picture for additional fire protection needed versus relocating fire protection. And I don't want to put Amy on the spot, but I also think that a renovation of the Hughes Street firehouse that is partially grant funded is a much less expensive alternative than a new firehouse.
Okay. Okay. All right, just brainstorming. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
for your
yeah, yeah. Oh, it's a good thought. And there is some more property there at Enchinton. Of course, I hope one day they build some more affordable housing on anything they got left over there.
Right, right. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you both.
Yes, sir.
Can I answer
All
any other?
right, Chief, anything else for Chief Courier? Thank you. You sure you didn't leave something out, Chief? That wasn't a very long list for this year.
I've always got more I can add. I was trying to be a team player here.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Chief. All right, so in
Thanks, Chief.
the
All right,
interest
thank
of
you.
time, let's move right along. For TNT, Robbie.
Good afternoon, all.
Yes, sir.
I didn't know if,
I'm pulling it up, Robbie.
okay,
You see that okay?
yes, I can.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to follow up after Chief's presentation, but mine should be pretty minor, minimal, hopefully. But basically what you see is number one, our request. We, in 2018, we worked with Trident to do this apprenticeship position. And, you know, we actually got two other students that really just didn't work out too well for us. That position took away from one of our traffic signal technicians, and we're requesting to get that refunded back into our department. Just put that back as a regular traffic signal tech and, in a sense, do away with the apprenticeship position. So that's what we're requesting with the first one.
Okay.
Next, we have the transportation engineer one position. James Wallace has been promoted. He's our transportation project manager. And, you know, we have, in a sense, identified about $35 million in projects that we've seen throughout the city that we could potentially work on and manage in-house. So we would really like to start doing that stuff in-house versus using our on-call technicians. And, you know, to have this additional position to help Mr. Wallace out would help us tremendously. So we're requesting another position in TNT under our transportation engineer. Next on the list is traffic safety inspector. We currently have 3 traffic safety inspectors now. We also have a permit clerk. Last year we did about 1,500 permits. I would say this year is kind of on a decline, but we're starting to find more violators. We're seeing that people are not coming in. Maybe it's due to our new pricing, but people aren't coming in and getting the permits like they were before. So our inspectors are out. They're working harder. We would like to add an additional inspector and maybe do some, you know, rotate shifts. We're seeing people are coming in, closing streets earlier, 6 o'clock in the morning, and that additional inspector will help us, you know, help catch and manage people closing the public right of way without proper permits. Moving along, number 4 is, you know, we've asked about this a couple times. You know, we're trying to do a signal retiming basically for Folly Road as well as Maybank Highway Corridor. That last study was done in 2016. We've been going out there doing what we can and try to tweak different timings, moving things around, trying to do what we can in-house, but we really need that a proper traffic study done, signal study done, you know, to make sure we have the, you know, proper functions on both Folly as well as Maybank.
Can I just jump in here real quick, Robbie, and just say thank you for that. That is so great to hear. If anybody has tried to travel Maybank or Folly Road during rush hour, it's tough. And if we can provide some relief through some of the signalization updates, that's going to come as a tremendous bit of good news to everybody on James Island, Johns Island, and even parts of West Ashley, because it starts to back up onto Folly Road over there as well. So just wanted to not let that go unnoticed and appreciated to you and your team. And just want to thank you for including this in the proposal.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So moving along, we have this new UV protective sheeting, in which basically we're just trying to preserve our signage, our signs that we put out now. You know, this protective sheeting will allow for our signs to stay, you know, more visible daytime as well as nighttime with the reflectivity. You know, so it's with our existing budget, we're just asking for an increase to, you know, be able to, you know, provide that functions to the signs that we fabricate. And again, we got a street sign budget. We're just, you know, we want to stay up on, you know, being able to fabricate what we can in-house. So we just got a request for an increase there as well. Guess what I'm looking at is office supplies. I don't know if that was on the other sheet, but I got number 8 as being our office supplies, where again, we were just trying to get additional money to be able to cover the cost for, you know, our everyday items that we use in our office. Is just your general request, I would say. And number 9, we got capital for furniture. The furniture, basically, again, I mentioned that we have the new clerk position up front, and the clerk is up there with our administrative assistant, and we just got spare parts from throughout the city to cover the front office area now. So we're requesting some funding so we can get the appropriate furniture for that, basically that general area. Okay, so next I have the flood sensor warning equipment. As you probably know, been working with Ben Allquest as well as Dale Morris, and they're working on a grant to so we can identify, flood prone problem areas, but this location was not a part of the grant. The Lockwood and Broad location that has, floods quite often. So we were looking at doing this in-house. We have treated the location over here behind me on Fishburne and Lockwood, and so we would just like to proceed with doing this in-house by purchasing our own sensor device for Lockwood and Broad. We're asking for additional variable message boards. Our department currently have message boards now, but we've been using them for certain special events and let's say storm events or emergency to where we have to pull them from their existing location and take them to other locations per se. So, we wanted to request 2 additional variable message boards so we can use those for those specific events. If it's dealing with a city special event or if it's dealing with an emergency response where we need to get additional information out there to the general public, that's what we want the message boards for. Moving along to number 12 is basically just a piece of equipment. It's a paint machine that we use in our signs and markings division. We want to be able to use that to do long center lines, in which the one we have now is basically inoperable. So we need to purchase a new one for next year. Glen McConnell traffic counts. We're looking to do a study that I believe the Long Savannah study was done. I believe that was 2016, 2018, but as we all know, there's been a lot out there in Glen McConnell and Bees Ferry area. So we were hoping to get some updated traffic counts and some data, just so, you know, we can know what's going on out there and, you know, help support the current traffic conditions that we got going on out there now. So going from there, 14 is we want to replace the existing master arms at East Bay and Broad. Those mast arms are in serious condition. They're leaning. They've been hit by vehicles. We've looked at, we call them miniature mast arms, which is, you know, we looked at different designs that are 4 foot to 6 foot to 10 foot. We don't want anything that's going to extend to impact the old Exchange building, but that is a location that we want to upgrade or at least install new mast arms, again, at that intersection. We have the existing restriping professional contract that we just asked for increase with that, as well as, you know, Daniel Island traffic signal retiming. We have 4 signals over there, and basically since the signal's been installed, there hasn't been a signal retiming done on those since 2003. So we would like to have that done as well. Sam Rittenberg, Old Town Road. Again, 2016 was the last time that was studied. So we were requesting funding to see if we can get a signal retiming study done on both SC7 and SC171. The traffic management center operator, again, that's been a request we asked, I believe, in previous years. You know, we would really like to have somebody manage our traffic control room. This would help tremendously with our technicians that are out in the field. We would have somebody that's in the office that would be able to you know, work directly with the computer system to help. You know, they'll be able to you know, reset a signal if it's in flash. They could adjust timings. They would be able to see the problems in real time and can communicate with technicians in the field to you know, work quicker to get that, whatever the problem is, taken care of sooner. And of course, there's always, you know, overtime. You know, our technicians are being called out, you know, even more. So there's requests for overtime to be covered for 2024. Of course, we want to stay up to date with all our certifications with the IMSA, the ISA, and, you know, just want to keep our staff, you know, up to date on all the new things that are coming out for us. So I'm moving down to 24. This electronic arrow board with our signs and markings, that's, you know, basically just your standard arrow board that they can use when they're out working in the street. Is the existing arrow boards that we have now are in bad shape and basically just need to be upgraded. The Nostalgia variable message board, that is one that our signal division would use when they're out working, especially at an intersection at night. It's a message board that pulls behind the vehicle and, you know, just used for traffic control. And then I guess the last on this request is Cummings Street two-way conversion. I will say that the figure, the number that we're showing, I guess, I don't know if it's a typo or what, but we have looked at, or we reached out to inquire about more up-to-date costs because Cumming Street would it would only be Cumming Street. The last study that was done basically over 10 years ago, included St. Philip Street, Line Street, and the area south of Calhoun. So this would just be Cumming Street, and Councilmember Seekings asked if we could include Rutledge Avenue as well as Ashley Avenue, in which the cost for that, just the study, was I believe it was 175,000 that we could be able to study both or all three of Cumming, Rutledge, and Ashley Avenue.
All right, Councilmember Shade, you have your hand up, you have a question? But then you're out of the picture now, so here he comes back. Councilmember Shade, you got a question?
I do, Mayor. So probably go back to item number 17, the retiming of 7 and 171. Is that 7? Is that Orange Grove Road we're talking about?
Highway 7, Sam Rittenberg, and Old Town Road is what we were looking at doing the study. Yes, from Orange Grove to Charlestown Landing, and then on Highway 7, I believe it's to 526. It's those corridors, yes, sir.
The corridors, not just a single
Oh,
intersection.
yeah, is it going to include Orange Grove Road? I've been fussing about that
Oh, yeah.
for a long time. So that is the intersection of Orange Grove Road and Sam Rittenberg with the 15 seconds coming out of Orange Grove heading west.
That
And
would be included.
that's going to be
correct.
included.
That's
Okay.
correct.
And I had to step up for a few seconds. I don't know if the mayor asked you about the very last thing on Cumming Street. Was that brought up, Mayor? Did you ask any questions about that? Cumming Street?
It's on the list
Yeah.
somewhat as a result of our conversation last night.
Right. And the night before, by the way, if you remember.
And the night before, yeah.
Yeah.
correct.
So Robbie, what is the delay in that? That was asked the other night. What has been the delay in has it been funding with this? Or is it something else?
Yes, it's been several delays. I mean, it was said that we would do it after we completed Spring and Cannon, in which that has been completed. And then, yes, basically there was a funding component attached to it to where, because again, at that time, it included Line Street, it was Cumming Street, it was St. Philip Street. But St. Philip Street now from Calhoun basically to Bufane, we're looking at putting in a cycle track now, so that wouldn't be part of the two-way conversion. And so we would just be doing, and we already did Line Street in-house, I believe 2 years ago. So it'll just now be Cumming Street, the study of Cumming Street from September Clark to Calhoun Street.
I think it'd make a lot of people happy in the Cannonboro area once that's been done. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome. So given how long that's been on the list, the Cumming Street section, Robbie, I certainly appreciate the request for yet 2 more streets to consider, but if that were to slow the Cumming Street thing down, I think that would not be fair. I don't know if there's a lot of savings by putting them all together or if it costs any extra time, but I'd kind of like to know, price those out separately, so to speak. What if we just did Cumming Street now and came back in another year and did Ashley and Rutledge, next time?
Yes, sir. Talking to because we did reach out to Stan Tech, and they really priced them. I think they had Cumming Street to study it was around 70,000. So if we're just looking at Cumming Street, it would be 770 just to study.
Right. And the study would give us a new estimate on the construction of how much it would cost to actually do the conversion?
That's correct, because I'm not sure, I want to say the number of signals that we have on Cumming Street, they would look at that, they would look at the, changes that were made. As I indicated, Line Street was changed. We got we got Spring and Cannon that was changed to two-way. So they'll look at how we would have to do the conversions of the traffic signals and how the traffic would flow, with the cross streets. So.
And would this conversion run all the way, how far north would it run?
Well, the last study had it going basically up to Line Street.
I see. Okay.
I think it was former council member Lewis did not want it to go into the West Side neighborhood as far as two-way.
I see. Gotcha. Councilmember Gregory?
I think that it should go all the way to race. Can we include that?
We can. As I mentioned, I think it was former council member Lewis that asked us not to go into the West Side, but yeah, we can definitely look at it going into up to Ray Street.
Okay. And I'm sure that I can talk with Councilman Mitchell, because right now all that's in our district. Okay. I really think we should go to race.
Yes, sir.
I'm sure DOT has to approve these changes, correct? That's
Oh, of course.
a big consideration crossing the Septima Clark Parkway and how that all works.
Yeah, and Mayor, I think we'd also have to look at Ray Street as well. At one point, we had talked about Ray Street being two-way. Yeah. I can't remember why it couldn't be, but coming off of Cumming Street and turning onto Race to get to King, because right now it's only one way.
Right.
So we can sort of just take all that into consideration and see if it can happen. But Robbie, you may recall, or probably could research why Ray Street couldn't be two-way between Rutledge and King.
Yes, sir. What I recall, because I remember looking at it, and we would have to take away parking on one side of Ray Street. And
okay. Say no more.
Parking. Yes, sir.
Well, Robbie, I would still like to break that into two items, Cumming Street versus the other ones, just in case budgetary restraints or such that we can do one and not the other.
Yes, sir.
I think the priority at this point would be Cumming Street.
Okay.
And Mayor, isn't there another concern though? If we go two-way, what other streets will be affected? I mean, with what we're getting ready to do with St. Philip Street, I agree with Robbie. I don't know how we could make that two-way. St. Philip Street is two-way in certain sections, right? Now.
Well, it's two-way basically from Line Street to Calhoun.
Okay. So it'll feed onto St. Philip then.
So basically, where we were originally going from Calhoun to Line would make St. Philip and Cumming both two-way from the same starting and ending points.
Okay.
So there is some logic to that, or common sense, and And again, when you look at the cost and the deliberation, yeah, personally, at this point, based upon those folks waiting for 10 years, I would say if you went north of Line Street and had to cross the Parkway, that I'd just soon call for that in another phase of it, so to speak, you know, down the road. You know, if there's a section like from Calhoun to Line that we can do quicker and more reasonable in cost and can accomplish in the next year or so, that would be a good goal, in my opinion.
As long as we're not flying blindly, it would just be good to know what the
Yeah,
addition would be. That's all, even if we don't go with it.
Well, you could do the study. How about this? You do the study of the whole.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. We're in the same place, Mayor.
Maybe with the intent that you would phase the execution of it.
Yes, yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Just don't leave it out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. All right, any other questions for Robbie? We're kind
We
of
still have to go over parking, his parking.
Oh, parking.
Finish, Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Shealy's had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Councilmember Shealy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Robbie, I just want to tell you, thank you for putting that in there for the traffic counts for Glen McConnell Parkway. I can't imagine anything more important than us trying to figure that out and make sure we're holding the developers to what they're supposed to be doing and holding them accountable on there. I will tell you this week, the traffic has been much worse than it's ever been. Now, certainly they're doing some construction out there, but when you can't get out of the neighborhood, when the light turns green for you to get onto Glen McConnell Parkway, you can't move to get onto Glen McConnell because the cars are blocking the way and everybody's fighting to get through these intersections. It is absolutely horrible out there. We have thousands of homes going, condos, apartments, everything going up there, going up Ashley River Road in Dorchester County that are coming through there. There is nothing more important than us to get our act together on the traffic counts on Glen McConnell Parkway. And with all the development that's going on out there, to be able to hold them accountable. So I just wanted to tell you, thank you. I'm not sure what the difference is in what we have now and what this new item is, but it's extremely important to get all those accounts, all those traffic counts. And I certainly appreciate it being on there and being up listed as one of the top higher priorities. So thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, back to Robbie, parking budget request.
Yes, the main with the parking request is we're asking for 3 parking traffic safety officers. And really the position is going to be used. They'll still have the capacity as a parking enforcement officer, but they'll be used more of a detail as the booting and towing detail, as well as special events. They'll be able to assist us with like Second Sunday with going out and handling the meter bags or the King Street closures and, you know, again, placing barricades and responding for, you know, various special events that we have throughout the city. Years ago, the police department had a safety service department that went out and, you know, kind of served in that capacity as far as placing barricades for events and stuff like that. And we think that's a position that we can manage in our parking services division, you know, to assist with, again, the events, as well as if there's a, you know, a need for assistance with emergency operations, they'll be there to help us as well. So we were asking for 3 traffic safety officers to support our parking division.
Okay.
And next on top of that is, of course, overtime. Unfortunately, we're still about 12 people short in our parking services division, which we've been leaning more on our existing officers and, you know, again, covering these special events is causing them to get a little bit more overtime, so we're asking for an increase in that budget as well. And then, of course, we want to, keep them exposed to, additional events and going to what a ATSSA convention is more of a, department wide, not just parking, but Mr. Mathis has gone in the past, as well as Tyrone Lawrence. So we want to expand that to more of our parking department.
Gotcha. All right, any questions on any of that from anyone? That all sounds pretty reasonable. Councilmember Waring?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is back on the question of boots on cars. Besides being parked by a fire hydrant or something like that, what's the criteria when we put a boot on somebody's car?
You have to have, I believe it's $250 or $200 in outstanding parking citations.
Okay, great.
When I say, I was gonna say, when I say outstanding, that means it's over 30 days old.
Yeah,
So you gotta get a ticket, you have 30 days to pay it at its regular rate. If not, a late fee will apply, and then you're subject to being looted or towed.
basically, you got a substantial bill that you just have ignored. Okay.
That's correct.
So if somebody is parked violated, I mean, this is something you and I talked about before. It was a private lot for everybody listening, across from, I think part of it anyway, across from Memager Auditorium. This was last Mosier Festival. You were there, Mr. Mayor, and so was I, and a lot of us on this call. Anyway, it was a private company, I think Palmetto, that came and put a boot on my truck and a group of senior citizens' cars, that ladies who were parked right next to me. Obviously none of us had a bill, but we were made to wait until obviously the company can come there and unlock it. And while waiting, these particular ladies didn't have the money to pay it at the time. So I actually paid it for them, so they could leave. But I thought about it, suppose this was a pregnant lady out here at night waiting for, the person to come and take the boot off of their car, all so they can get cash paid on the spot. My mind even floated on the provost's husband, who came out early that morning, for a walk, and obviously was brutally murdered. I mean, I don't think we should make people, now somebody with a bill, I'm not talking about you, Robbie, but I don't think people who don't have substantial or have bills at all, I just don't see why we can't write a ticket and have the people pay that. In the world today, I don't think we ought to make people vulnerable waiting. And the part about it, the person that showed up had a Glock on his hip. So in his business, he has a pistol. The person that's waiting to be relieved of a violation, they'd be sitting there at night. And it took about, Councilman Gregg was on this call, it took about between 20 and 30 minutes for the person to arrive. But and then when they arrive with attitude. I just think our community is different now. I think technology is different now. I know that companies, if they want to get their money, fine. But I don't think we ought to expose people potentially to being victimized while they wait, in particular at night, for a person to come and remove the boot from their car. So maybe that's not part of this budget, but I just don't see why we can't write it.
Could I respectfully suggest we take this up at public safety? It's not really a budget item here.
I agree with you. Anyway, but when he mentioned the boot, it triggered that memory. So
Yeah, that's right.
so I agree taking up. I mean, I'm fine for the company getting the money, but good God, today you don't have to make people wait until, especially at night, or women wait at night. on till somebody.
I must say, I personally have never been quite satisfied with our requirements for detention and parking on private lots. So I'm fully willing to have that discussion again.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Robbie, I did have one question. Are we using that that other device now rather than the boot to put on people's windshields? Didn't we try that?
The barnacles, yes, sir.
Barnacle.
Yes.
And is that what we primarily use now rather than a boot?
Primarily, yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. They must be working okay.
They're working good.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, any other questions, thoughts, comments? Amy, you want to close out?
Sure. So just a quick update. Next week, we will meet with Recreation, IT, and Public Service. And then the following week will be Parks and Police. And then we'll squeeze whatever else we can into those other two meetings. So that will finish up all our departmental reports for us to start really digging into the rest of the budget after that.
Okay, all right. So I want to thank Robbie Somerville and Robert Summerfield, and Chief Courier's gone already, but thank y'all for presenting that to us today and letting us know your priorities. And we'll take that under advisement, everyone, and maybe committee members. I heard a few comments, but if y'all have any real special interest in the priorities of what the departments have presented, please share that back with Amy and I.
And when we go through everybody's, but we'll go through every single request like we usually do too. So there'll be opportunity to discuss it further as well. And I'll send you these lists so you'll have them beforehand as well.
That'd be great.
Amy, I had a quick question. Have we done stormwater yet, or is that?
No, we usually do that later because
Got
it's its own separate. It's its own separate budget, so we don't have to rush that one like everybody else. So we'll do that October, even early November.
Got it. That's an important one.
Yes, it is.
Awesome. They're all important, of course. Well, thank you all so much.
Thanks,
Sure.
everybody. Appreciate it. Y'all